According to British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, Russian President Vladimir Putin is endangering the whole of Europe with the fighting near the Ukrainian power plant Zaporizhia. Putin's reckless actions could now directly endanger the security of all of Europe, Johnson said in a phone call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy early Friday morning. According to a statement from his office, Johnson said he wanted to hold a special session of the UN Security Council on the situation at the nuclear power plant in the coming hours, as they put it. Britain will do everything it can to ensure the situation does not deteriorate further, it said. According to Ukrainian sources, a fire broke out at the nuclear facility. It was said that Europe's largest nuclear power plant was being attacked by tanks and from the air. Johnson and Zelenskyy had spoken out in favor of a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine's energy minister Herman Halushenko has called for NATO to intervene in response to reports of a fire at Zaporizhia and the nuclear power plant. That's why we demand not only a professional assessment of what is happening, but real intervention with the toughest measures, including by NATO and the countries that have nuclear weapons, Halushenko wrote on Friday night on Facebook. He continued to write that Europe's largest nuclear power plant was being attacked by tanks and from the air. These statements could not initially be verified independently. Halushenko wrote that he had already called US Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm and asked for the airspace to be closed over Ukraine. We stand on the brink of a major technological catastrophe in human history, he wrote. And Britain, as I said, is calling for an emergency UN Security Council meeting after the Russian attack on the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. The reckless behavior of Russian President Vladimir Putin could directly threaten the security of all of Europe, as I said, Boris said. And the two international courts in The Hague are also dealing with the war of the Russian leadership against Ukraine. A procedure begins on Monday. A second could be directed against President Putin. Ukraine has the floor before the International Court of Justice in The Hague next Monday. The United Nations Court, which is tasked with settling interstate disputes, is considering a type of injunction the government of Ukraine has sought against Russia under the UN Convention Against Genocide. The UN judges are to classify the Russian attack as genocide and at the same time reject Russia's claim that genocide against the Russian minority is being committed by Ukrainian troops in eastern Ukraine. The Kremlin's lawyers will vehemently oppose this request by the Ukrainian complainant on Tuesday because Russia denies the jurisdiction of the court in The Hague. Since no genocide is committed by Russia, there is no case and therefore no court would have jurisdiction, they say. The crux of proceedings before the International Court of Justice is plaintiff and defendant states must recognize the jurisdiction of the court by consensus. Russia, and by the way also the USA, have never recognized the United Court as competent in general, but usually have to give their consent in individual cases, explains Professor Kai Ambos, an expert in international criminal law from Göttingen in Germany. It is therefore hardly to be expected that a hearing at the beginning of next week will lead to tangible results in the interests of the attacked Ukraine. But the trial draws attention to the international courts, which will deal with Russian President Putin's war. A second trial before another court of the international community is also getting underway. The investigator at the International Criminal Court has already stated his investigations into whether the Russian president or other leading figures in the Kremlin are responsible for war crimes or crimes against humanity in Ukraine. The International Criminal Court is tasked with enforcing international law and determining the guilt of individuals. Unlike the International Court of Justice of the United Nations, it does not judge the behavior of states, but rather individual defendants. I'm very satisfied that we can credibly establish that the alleged war crimes and crimes against humanity were committed in Ukraine, said the court's chief prosecutor Karim Khan in The Hague. He instructed his prosecutors to investigate and secure evidence. The first investigators are already traveling the region, Khan said on Thursday. And for Kai Ambos, an expert, as I said, in international criminal law at the University of Göttingen, it all happens very quickly. It's extraordinary. We've actually never had that since the criminal court existed, that the prosecutor reacts so quickly without the UN Security Council being involved, said Ambos. Investigator Karim Khan's work is given even more weight by the fact that 38 states, led by Great Britain, formally support the process. As a result, extensive investigations are possible immediately, and there's no need for an examination by a so-called trial chamber with 3 judges, said British Foreign Minister Liz Truss. An investigation into Russia's barbaric acts is urgent, and those responsible must be held accountable, Truss said in London. In addition to Germany, the 38 supporter states include almost all EU members, but also Canada, New Zealand and Costa Rica. The Göttingen professor Ambos thinks it would be better if the states showed solidarity with the International Criminal Court and its investigators in the current situation. He can investigate ex officio, but of course he has even more legitimacy if additional states refer to the situation in Ukraine, said Ambos. However, one problem for the further proceedings is that Russia has not acceded to the treaty on which the court is based, the Statute of Rome. Like China, Russia is an enemy of the court, Ambos explains. Only contracting states are obliged to cooperate. That does not apply to Russia. Ukraine is also not a state party, but has submitted to the judgment of the judges in The Hague through a declaration. Will Russian President Vladimir Putin ever be in the dock if the trial goes ahead? It's not completely out of the question, but it's not likely that Mr. Putin will have to appear before the court at some point, Ambos says. Those in power, like Putin, usually die in office and are therefore not extradited. One possibility is a fall of Putin by the opposition. Then a new government in Russia could transfer the deposed president to The Hague. This is what happened to Sudan's former president Omar al-Bashir, who was extradited by the country's new government last year. We cannot predict how world history will develop. You have to be a great optimist, Kai Ambos said. In the course of a possible trial, the criminal court could issue an international arrest warrant for Putin and other suspected perpetrators. They then could be arrested when traveling to state parties to the court. It's also possible that the prosecutors of individual states will start investigations, as happened in Lithuania on Thursday. Such procedures would also be conceivable in Germany, by the way. In January, a Syrian doctor was convicted of crimes against humanity in the Syrian war in the first trial in the world in Koblenz in Germany. Such procedures based on the principle of universal law are in principle also possible against Russians who are involved in the war against Ukraine. Anyone can file a criminal complaint with the Federal Public Prosecutor's Office here. Proceedings could also be brought before the Council of Europe's European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. In the case of the Yugoslav wars, the United Nations set up a special court, a special tribunal. In the case of Russia, however, this could fail because of its veto right in the UN Security Council. But I just want to stress one thing one more time. This war is a war by Putin, not by the Russian people. It's a small minority of people that want this war and that started this war. So please don't generally blame the Russian people here. We have to be fair here and talk about the real perpetrators. It is not the Russian people. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.